broadcast button has been pressed. So you gradually start seeing the participants number shoot up.
Hey, it's just me and you.
It's just me and you.
This is also why I was never into events businesses in the history of Brainlabs, because, you know, I think it's like this maybe childhood insecurity that you have a party and no one turns up.
Well, right now,
which is why we bought businesses that have events, and then we couldn't do those events anymore. But,
absolutely. Well, presently we have 152 and rising people in our party, so people are turning up. So
it's your party; they're here for
you. So everyone, season 2, episode 2. Today is webinar day, and it's mid-afternoon, which is very different. But everyone, welcome. Do pop in the comments box, in the chat box, where you're watching from. There was 152 when I checked a second ago, but there'll be more coming in. Let us know where you're watching from. It'd be wicked to see that. Today, our guest is Daniel Gilbert, who's the founder and CEO of Brainlabs. In 2012, he founded Brainlabs, an agency with a mission: make marketing more scientific. Through experimentation, a mathematical approach to marketing, and a very human style of building a company, Daniel's built something very significant that also does good. Daniel has led Brainlabs to be a 400+ person company, picking up clients such as Vans, Expedia, Which, Bed Bath & Beyond, and a couple of high-profile acquisitions, as well as a shed load of awards along the way. It's been a pretty crazy 8 years, no doubt. On a personal level, Daniel's someone that I've learned a whole lot from. When I worked agency side before taking the marketing meetup full time, it's fair to say that I could barely move without seeing Daniel everywhere with his regular contributions to PPC Hero, eConsultancy, and many more. You'll kind of have to check out his LinkedIn profile picture to know what I'm talking about here. But it was at that time, like, where it almost felt like his little avatar was smiling directly at me, just saying, "Here I am again, here I am." And while at the time, I will confess to a semblance of jealousy at Daniel's success, this has turned into nothing but respect for his knowledge, passion, and his eloquence. And that's really quite something to have built over the course of 8 years. If you told me Daniel didn't sleep, it wouldn't surprise me. So right now, if we're going to sum up that little section, I'd say we have a person very much worth listening to. And as a final aside, I can also testify to him being a thoroughly nice chap. To lift the curtain to the backstage interactions, he's been nothing but thoroughly friendly, open, willing, and sort of wanted to understand the community so he could put together something that's going to be really useful too. So today's session is called Proving the Value of Marketing. It's relevant because as marketers, it's not good enough to just do something and then expect the budget to keep on flowing when you haven't proven the value of that activity. It's also important because as marketers, we often do a bad job in marketing ourselves and communicating our roles within companies. Today's session is important because we have one of a really unique thinker on marketing in our company for an hour. So hopefully by the end, you would have learned something new, had your perspective shifted, and had a bunch of things you can implement at the end. This session will run as a presentation, but very, very crucially, we're going to be taking your questions. So if you wiggle your mouse down the bottom, you'll be able to see the Q&A feature. That's the place where you stick your questions, not the chat box. If you stick your questions in the Q&A, that makes my life a lot easier, and we can make sure that the right questions get asked to Daniel. Don't forget to use the thumbs up feature in there as well, because if you see a question that you like, you can just whack it up and we'll take them from the top. Also, if you are commenting in the chat box, don't forget to switch your messages to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, only me and Daniel can see it, which if you want to only message us, that's one thing. But if you want to have a chat with a wider community, do switch that to all panelists and attendees, and then you can communicate with everyone else. Finally, before I hand over to Daniel, I just want to thank the sponsors. I feel like people are starting to take the mick out of me by how much I actually make sure that they are thanked. But it's so important. These sponsors are what keep the show on the road, so to speak, with the marketing meetup. And you, as the community, have been amazing at supporting them too. Just by thanking them, by using their services, by engaging with them, we show our value when we're talking about proving the value of marketing to these sponsors, which is incredible. I won't go into depth here because we've spoken about the sponsors here, but also before in the pre-email, and we'll do so in the follow-up email. But very quickly to mention them here, we've got Pitch, Content Cal, Fiverr, Redgate, Cambridge Martin College, Lido, Brand, Further, Third Light, Bravo, and Human. My only ask with each of these brands, you'll see in the follow-up email, there's a follow-up message where their LinkedIn profiles have been linked. Just take the time to message them. It makes them feel appreciated, which they are, and allows us to sort of communicate with the community directly. All that said, that's my introduction done. So, Daniel, there's 212 people in our party today. So over to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. And what a glorious introduction. So thank you very much. Very kind.
No worries.
A pleasure to be here to meet the community. I've seen the comments flying in on the right already. Hello, Matt, and thank you for remembering that remarketing campaign. A classic. I was going to, as I mentioned to Joe, leave as much time as possible for questions because I've understood that the community likes to interact. So I've got my opening piece, which I hope sparks some debate, but I'm keeping it relatively short but snappy with some core kind of takeaways that I think you'll find perhaps more straightforward than you're expecting. So anyway, here we go. Joe, give me a thumbs up if that's up on the screen, because I can see you in a tiny thumbnail and no one else, all the comments coming in. So
yeah, you're all good.
Start getting feedback. You have to shout to me, and that includes insults. We'll take those too. That's fine.
That sounds good.
Well, firstly, hello. The best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, post regularly, and you can find me there. I wanted to talk today about measurement of marketing, and in order to do so, I thought it was useful to give a brief kind of tour of history to understand where we are today and where we've kind of come from as a marketing industry. So if you rewind 30 or 40 odd years, the marketing industry and the disciplines within marketing were creative and commercial. You had your kind of madmen and your media agencies. So come up with brilliant ideas and then purchase space, centralize that, package it and resell it to clients. And you know, I think it's worth remembering that in 1973 there was 3 TV channels, one of which carried advertising. So if you described advertising in that time, it required its own type of genius. But of course, I'm painting the picture for how quickly that's changed to a new type of genius required within the last few years. So this graph shows us biddable as a portion of media overall. It's also called digital, search, auction-based media. There's lots of different versions of it, or even digital media. And it speaks to the way that the media is traded, not necessarily the actual media itself. So TV at some point is not going to disappear, but it will become traded programmatically. That's not the purpose of today. That's quite widely agreed with most industry experts. It's a case of when, not if. And it's not really the point that I'm trying to get to today, because even if you don't think it's going to happen, well, 50 to 60% is already digital. So it's highly relevant regardless. It's within that portion that's digital, that's either half or going to be all of media, that the rules have changed from that kind of creative and commercial that I showed you earlier. And in the right, there's some comments on there about buying power kind of disappearing. Those of you that buy Google or Facebook ads know that it's an auction. So there's no discounts. Hard as some people might try, they do not exist. Everyone can bid at the same price with a computer connection, really. These days, in certain instances, ad copy is not about one brilliant piece of creative. It's about multiple iterations and testing those to work out what speaks best to each customer. And that's the kind of test and learn that I've referenced in the title. Likewise, targeting isn't intuitive. It's not the opinion of one CMO who thinks that they know their customer. We can calculate responses from customers through analysis. And lastly, to the main point of this presentation or webinar, the impact doesn't need to be estimated. We can measure impact if we choose to do so. So in this kind of test and learn era, people that have run digital campaigns, I think this will be native to, and I think I don't want to preach to the converted, Joe, so thumbs up if this is a community that's well aware. I think one of the core ingredients, or we all understand potentially, that high-performing marketing businesses in a digital era use this kind of process of test and learn. So it's this kind of loop where we test something and we learn something from that. And you only have to call out the likes of a Booking.com as the sort of leader in the digital space, and it's quite well known the kind of testing engines that they've built. Better businesses don't just test and learn; they turn those learnings into new challenges that they can take back to the business, and then they test those and they kind of operate in that iterative loop. There's another distinction that I want to throw in today, which is relevant for our purposes, which kind of breaks out from that loop and then activates some of those learnings as earnings. I call this process test and learn. I'm aware that learnings is not a real word. Thank you for all of those commenting. No one commented that yet. And I also wanted to point out that earnings is, yes, at the heart of the framework that I think we should be using to run effective marketing activity. And I don't know at what point this became the norm, but marketers seem quite afraid to talk about money. And actually, I think that's a mistake. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that the marketing industry has made as a whole. I saw a brilliant article by Tom Roach, I believe his name is, come out the other day that's well worth a read. And I'll get Joe to add a link to it as we distribute materials. But he kind of references this idea that marketers are, or references the data that hopefully all of you would have seen, all you wonderful folk would have seen, that marketers or advertisers are the least trusted group of people out of any organizational unit, scoring lower than even politicians. And forgive me, I don't remember the number, but it was low double-digit percentage of people that actually trusted advertisers or marketers. So he interprets even this kind of recent push towards brand purpose or meaningfulness, etc., in marketing as, this kind of I can't remember what his words are, but it's this kind of need to feel more important, significant, or value additive than perhaps people give us credit for, because people think that we can't be trusted. Whereas my kind of response to this is actually doubling down on what we should be doing, which is making more money for businesses. And there's no shame in that, much like there's no shame in sales. We are helping connect people with the products of the businesses that we represent. So I say earnings. And yes, I don't think we should be afraid to talk about profit, EBITDA, shareholder value. And if those terms, any of those terms are feel or seem unusual to you, then that's probably my challenge number one, which is understand the metrics that actually drive a business and that are actually important to a business. So we'll come on to this afterwards, but one way or one useful tool that I found of doing that is asking someone in the business, whether you're agency side, I think we're a kind of 50-50 split, but if you were to ask the business what they're trying to achieve, the first answer is not normally profit, earnings, shareholder value, EBITDA. They might say customer engagement or something like that. And one way that I found to really unlock this or arrive at the true answer is this kind of 5 whys process. It's like, okay, so why do you want to track customer engagement? So that if we do well with customer engagement, then customers will keep coming back and have a great product. Okay, well, why do you want customers to keep coming back? Why? And eventually, more or less, depending on the structure of the business, you'll come back to something that fundamentally links to long-term value creation in the business, right? So earnings, shareholder value, long-term profit, etc. Profit being a measure of sustainability, right? And I'm not getting at profiteering here. I'm talking about conscious capitalism, insofar as it's not necessarily one or the other. And for the purposes of this talk, probably not, probably slightly off topic, so I won't go into it. But most businesses' stated aim is to make a profit, and understanding that, realizing that, depending on where you are in your careers, sometimes it takes people entire careers to realize that. The sooner that you kind of recognize that, the quicker that we can make marketing relevant again. And I think, I wouldn't understate this either. Apart from being the least trusted people, CMOs, who are, I suppose, the people that we would all look up to as the ultimate kind of pinnacle of seniority within our particular stream, are also the least trusted member of the boardroom. So 80% of CEOs in a recent study either didn't trust or weren't sure about their CMO. And if those types of surveys with their slightly patchy data don't float your boat, then have a look at the more empirical data around longevity in the boardroom of each of those roles, because they're the shortest serving member. So something's going wrong there, right? And I would argue that it's probably baked up in this kind of process here, which is, where is that link to earnings? Where is the link back to the business to be able to say that what we do is bringing value to the business in the same way that every other part of the business is expected to do? I saw some, lots of commentary, and I think Joe might have been included in this, I can't remember, but there's this popular kind of trope around that, after a recession, the brands that succeed are the ones that invest. I can't remember what it is exactly. And don't cut your marketing budgets, etc., etc., etc. And respectfully, like, I looked at that, particularly as we were going through a post-COVID moment where obviously, Brainlabs represents, I suppose, the market as a whole, right? We've got lots of different clients from different sectors, so really representative of the market. So, we took a real downturn. Of course, we cut our marketing campaigns. Like, it doesn't mean that they're off forever, but when it's a choice between discretionary spend and people, you often go for the discretionary spend. So it's not, it's not that surprising. And then I think connected to that, what we didn't cut was the part of our marketing that we could link to sales. So, I think there's something in there for everyone, which is, don't be surprised if stuff gets cut when you can't link that to actual value creation within the business. And don't be surprised if your job is at peril because you can't link it to success in the business. And don't be surprised if no one listens to you or thinks you're not important. If you can't take or understand the very simple principle between, from company to company about how that business makes money and what they care about most. And I don't mean that to sound threatening, because it's actually much more of an opportunity, because the moment that you get to do that is the moment that you'll start to see careers, decisions kind of accelerate around you, rather than being the CFO's enemy, for example. So the core capabilities in a business can support this kind of test and earn loop. So starting with a challenge, turning that into a test, learning from that test, and then turning that test into earnings. So I've tried to summarize here what I think are the kind of components or capabilities within the business that support this. And it starts with a strategy, which I guess, using different terminology, could just be an idea. Like, everything starts with an idea. Any marketing campaign has an idea. And that's where that creative genius still exists, by the way. So I referenced the kind of creative and commercial. That definitely hasn't disappeared in this new version of marketing. It's just that there's this kind of scientific layer in between that we'll get onto in a moment. So you've got ideas, and it still requires a certain type of genius to come up with brilliant ideas. And there's an element of that I don't think can come from machines, AI, or any of the other fancy data stuff that we might talk about later. It's an art part of it, not a science. But then, of course, in order to turn that idea into a test where we either validate or invalidate that idea, before we can take that to a channel test, we have to know through the kind of data measurement section. Oh, hang on, have I got a, I can annotate, can't I?
You're going to get fancy here with the
Whoa, there you go.
Look at that.
Sweet face. I realized I was pointing at my screen, but of course no one can see where I'm pointing. And I'm just adapting to this webinar world.
Absolutely.
So before you can turn, hang on, ideas into channel tests, we need to set up the right data measurement framework. And that is to say, you cannot successfully run a test if you don't know what success looks like before you started running that test. It sounds kind of obvious, but I'll kind of come back and circle back to that in a moment because it happens more often than you would see. So you've got an idea, you've got the right way to measure, like when we run a test, is this going to work? Then you have to have the right capability to execute those tests within channel. That could be search, social, programmatic, SEO, digital channels I'm talking about here, not offline at the moment. And there is a different level of skill in different organizations, of course, that we have to build in that area. Some are geared up to test at scale, some aren't. And I think it's that scale bit that I'm really interested in because if you want to test big ideas, not tactical ideas, then you've got to be geared up to kind of measure that correctly and test it. So by way of example, I'm not that interested in, for example, an on-site test as a spin-off of the oversimplified Expedia test of changing a button color from green to orange or something and making $5 million extra. That sort of stuff is tactical, probably overhyped, and in the context of a multi-billion-dollar business is not actually that much. So probably over-marketed, let's say. What we really want to be testing is, and likewise in any ads, for example, like sure you can test mildly different versions of ad copy, but I think winning for me is when we test big ideas like product flows, entire products, for example, entire website flows, systems, attribution models, etc. In any case, I'm waffling, so let's move on to the next part of the wheel, which is around the insights. And again, if they're big tests with big strategic ideas, then there's some level of data science required to interpret them, right? Like it's not straightforward to interpret multi-stage, multi-product type tests. And that's the point at which analysis becomes big data. The only difference really is that there's lots of it. So apart from that, don't get too upset by the term data science. But critically, I think the power of an insights or data science team is to then take those insights and then feed them back through the team into new challenges or new ideas. So it's not just about implementing them and implementing the successful ideas, it's about feeding the loop. It's about feeding the loop so that we use insights from those big tests to come up with, oh, what's happened to my camera? Have you lost me?
Yeah, we've lost your beautiful dream.
Hang on. We're stopping halfway through the loop.
You've actually
it's a disaster.
So there's actually the top question here from a number of people actually is Daniel's camera is such high quality. What's the secret?
I don't really want to go into my whole morning skincare routine. It's nothing to do with the camera. Yeah, it's Joe asked me that. So I had an old DLSR camera hanging around, and there's this piece of tech called an Elgato Cam Link, and you plug it in, and it kind of behaves as your camera. Maybe I'll send a little link around, shall I, Joe, to your? Yeah,
that would be good. Yeah, we'll add it to the blog post. Anyway, we digress.
Thanks for appreciating. So we digress. Here we are, back on the slides, back with the camera, and talking about how that data measurement piece that's got lots of beautiful squiggly lines around it is core to kind of the loop, and probably one of the areas, to my earlier point, where we see businesses fail more often than not. Now, how do I turn off this clicky thing? Ah, there we go. Oh, it's still got my annotations on the screen. Joe, what are we doing?
That's hilarious. I don't even know how to remember.
Clear all drawings. There we go. So here I've given an example. If you think about a wheel, like you need all of these parts of your kind of team or your capabilities working well together to deliver a brilliant data-driven testing program. So you need great ideas at the top. And the one that we were kind of focused in on today was this data measurement piece. And this is what I've observed in many different teams is, there's lots of good ideas. And that's a process in and of itself, right? The creative process is not just individual brilliance. These days, it can be customer surveys, internal surveys, the CEO's opinion, the CMO's opinion, taken and interpreted, all carefully brought into tests that are weighted by how likely they are to be impactful and how big they are, really, how likely they are to fail as well. So it's another good indicator. So there was a process into that, but our kind of focus for today was on that kind of measurement piece, which is critical to the kind of test and earn loop. So it's saying, look, this team have great strategy. The data measurement isn't right. They've got loads of ability to test at scale. They've got a great insights team, and they've got a great team overall. But in data measurement, they cannot measure the success of their individual tests in a way that's agreed across the whole of the business and in a way that's then linked to what that business values at its most. So it is not the same metric for every business, and there are too many, having looked at the audience list, there are too many different types of business, and every single one of them will have a different way of defining their own success, how that's measured, what the business thinks is important and what isn't. The easiest way to find out is ask. If you can't currently give an eloquent description for how your business makes money, then take that as today's kind of first takeaway. Go and ask some people and ask your CFO. They're often locked in the back room, so they love talking to marketing people. But really, like, that would be my first kind of challenge to you is in the process of doing so, you're trying to understand how a business really works. Much like you would do, I'm sure, client side or agency side. If you're trying to write a good marketing response to a brief, then really you're trying to understand the client and what motivates them and what they're trying to achieve. And I think it's the same thing here, but in the context of how the business really works and digging deeper to try and find out what it is. So, it's difficult to say what best-in-class data measurement looks like on individual level, but on a kind of macro level, it's that we can track the success or otherwise of any idea, no matter what size. And there is an agreed upon set of metrics across the whole business that are shared. And that it links to a metric with longevity within the business. So repeatability, let's say. So I think that's the kind of focus. Of course, I've given you this diagram, but of course, if there's great strategy and we can measure it, but no testing capability, things can fall down there. And equally, if the insights are no good, then it might be that we've got some brilliant ideas that we can measure and we've run great tests for, but no one can actually interpret those or feed them back to the business, which again is a failure point. But the kind of topic for today, before we kind of switch to questions, was around data measurement, the importance of measurement overall to a business, and hopefully some of what I've presented has helped demystify that a little bit, because it's not mathematics necessarily, it's more commercial than that. The mathsy stuff can happen at the insights level, but the understanding of the core business and linking back our activity to that, doing everything that we humanly can to understand that and link back to it, is what really will make our marketing or us as marketers more successful, each and every one of you really in their own way, I believe. As you interact with your businesses overall. So I'm trying to go to the next slide, but doesn't like me. There we go. No. Shut down. I'm never annotating again, I'll tell you. I'll practice my annotations. So there you go. I wanted to open this up to a discussion, but just kind of recap some what I would call simple steps. So find out what the business cares about. Just keep asking. Ask different people. Ask senior people within the business. Ask their bosses. Ask the CFO. Find out what they're really measuring, or what they really care about, or what they have to report to their stakeholders about. If you're a publicly listed business, read the shareholder report and see what they actually have to report on, because that's really what they're worried about. So when you go there saying our CPA has gone up by £3 and our impressions have gone up by X, they don't care, because it's not linked to anything that they're accountable for or responsible for. find out what it is, then do whatever it takes to measure that. There is always a way. I appreciate that in certain channels it's more complex, that we don't have a perfect view of people online. I think that would be a mistake to even suggest that. There's no way that we have even full visibility in digital, let alone offline. But there are proxies for that, right? That's where you start using what we've kind of always used, which is proxies for success. And then finally link all of your marketing to that. So report on your marketing according to what the business cares about, and make sure that it's simple to kind of take away from that. And then lastly, enjoy your newfound marketing fame and success.
Amazing.
I shall stop sharing. I will also stop annotating because yeah.
The killer of presentation flow is the annotation style. Right. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was awesome. And the reason why it was awesome was because I think there was an element of hard truths in there, which is ground your marketing in the money or whatever matters to the business, which is often money, which is something I think we so often need to hear. But I think, as much as anything else, it also removes that kind of that mystery about this stuff, because at the end of the day, when we speak about individuals in businesses, then so often we relegate people to like the CFO role or the CMO role or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're human beings, and those human beings have a set of needs which quite clearly need to be matched. So if you match those, then you're onto a winner, and you can enjoy, as you say, your marketing fame and success. So thank you very much.
Not guaranteed, by the way.
No. Well, no, but there's obviously a lot of hard work involved in every one of those steps. But that is also our job. So if you were to sort of present that wheel, that seems like a really good starting point. So we've got a bunch of questions that have come in, but folks, if you've got more questions, then do drop them into the Q&A feature just found down below. And if you see any questions that you likewise, please give them a thumbs up so they can get to the top. There seems to have been some themes that have come out too, and even though today was speaking about how to prove the value of marketing, some people are looking to benefit from your experience in growing an agency as well. So hopefully you won't mind taking some.
No, of course not. Pleasure. In fact, I asked you about that as well, in case that was like an interesting angle. But
for sure, there's certainly some interested folks here, so we'll get to those questions. But first, on the first topic, so we've got a question from James, my mate James, who says, it's a question about brand marketing. So he says, how do you look to measure or explain the value of the top of funnel activity / brand building marketing? Brands want to look great, have great interactions with clients, but are usually focused on the dollars, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's a super question. I didn't actually reference this in the talk, but I actually don't buy into the distinction between brand and performance marketing. Mm-hmm. I think it's an unhelpful distinction. If you took, I suppose, classic examples of like brand building marketing versus like bottom of the funnel, I don't even like funnels, but there you go. Bottom of the funnel search marketing, right? Like someone Googles your product and then clicks on it. Mm-hmm. Versus, let's say, like top of the funnel, proper brand building, Coca-Cola type. We'll advertise on TV. We have no expectation that you're going to go and purchase a Coca-Cola after seeing that. The difference between those, yes, you can call one brand a performance, but the difference fundamentally is the ROI model. It is not that Coca-Cola do not have a measurement model for measuring the ROI of their marketing, right? That they're highly trained, highly successful marketers and quite brilliant at it. Their model is not a last click model. It is not a immediate response model. It's a completely different one. So like you've got that kind of difference between those. So I think it's a great question. I think the same logic applies both to. I wasn't specifying, I guess, performance marketing. That's the kind of logic that I would apply to brand marketing, which is put out ideas test ideas about where your brand could be, have the right framework to be able to measure those, and then take those insights to actually try and understand, what your customers care about and what they don't. So definitely not anti-brand. I'm an absolute fervent brand advertising supporter. I just don't think that it's immune to being linked to some sort of profit, shareholder value, revenue. And if it's truly not linked, then it's very welcome in canon as art. But to me, it's not marketing, and it kind of misses the point of what we're really tasked or supposed to be trained to do. And by the way, I'm not trying to take any of the fun out of it, right? Some of the most amazing advertising, is truly creative, but it's effectiveness that I'm really interested in, and that I think we should be focused on. That's not to do a disservice. Like, I love art as well. I just don't think it's part of our core role or what we're supposed to be selling. So yeah, I think both, and a balance between the two is, well, it's almost actually the framework, this kind of test and learn or test and earn framework is what I would use to try and understand what the balance between brand building and activation should actually be within a business, right? There's a lot of theory out there, and a lot of it is well studied and kind of looked at, but a lot of that is postulation, right? And until you kind of experiment with that, so by way of example, splitting a country in two and having a 70% upper funnel, 30% lower funnel strategy in half, and the reverse in the other one, and actually seeing overall what's more impactful on your business, because it's really quite difficult to do with econometrics, to be honest. And econometrics is quite static almost, so you have to gather lots of data and look back. So I'm much more in favor of understanding, or at least experimenting with the truth in a marketing model. And I think when you think about what that means or what it links back to, it's kind of this kind of scientific method. The same is actually true of a lot of kind of what you would call classic science, in terms of how drugs are discovered, for example. People try out a bunch of different ideas and then they arrive at the answer. And then, of course, they rationalize it afterwards as though it was meant to be or it was obvious. But really, they didn't have, sort of had a bunch of different ideas at the beginning, tested a load, and then saw that something worked. So I think, it's not to be scorned upon. I think actually actively encouraged and managed around in a marketing context.
No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, no, great. So we've got a question now from George, who says, with walled gardens, with examples of Facebook and Google across the digital marketing ecosystem, how would you suggest overcoming data management challenges?
Oh, sorry, Joe, I missed the very start of that.
Oh, sorry. So with walled gardens, such as Facebook and Google, across the digital marketing ecosystem, how would you suggest overcoming data management challenges where you cannot afford an expensive provider?
Yeah, pile the pressure on Google and Facebook to reduce the walled gardens. Well, I mean, I've spoken to both of them quite actively about it. And yeah, anyway, let's not get into that. What can you practically do as a marketer today? I think firstly, accept that there was that none of those measurement models were perfect in the first instance. So I see a lot of stuff going around attribution, and coming from quite a data sciencey background, I was always a bit suspicious of attribution and how it was sold as a product, because it doesn't reflect how people buy. We all know this from personal experience, right? Even a holiday purchase, it's not one journey on one computer or across devices that you're all logged into the same thing on. There's conversations that you have offline, and that reflects most, I would say, if not a minority. So you're kind of starting with a very imperfect data set to begin with, which further loses by ad blockers, cookie blockers, changing of devices, browsers, etc., etc. To the extent that I wouldn't be surprised if you're kind of dealing with a sort of 40 or 50% data set that's kind of presented as this empirical truth. Yeah. So I'm not against attribution models. I think there's a place for them, there's value for it. And to the point about walled gardens, that makes it even worse because you haven't got one single view of the truth anywhere. That's where this kind of skill in measurement comes around, because you can't rely on that. And you've got to come up with your own ways in some instances of actually measuring and tying back to real business outcomes some of your marketing activity. And if it needs to be more top level than at click level or impression level, then so be it, right? Like that's, you can optimize towards micro KPIs within channel, but still link that at a greater level outside of those channels, which is kind of what we're forced to do at the moment. Maybe in a non-walled garden world, there's more data available and we can do a better job of sort of impression level optimization, but I'd probably ditch that and focus on some bigger marketing problems for the time being.
So actually, that's a really interesting point, actually. So one of the thoughts that came to me over the course of the presentation was, as you observed about our audience, there's a bunch of people at a bunch of levels in different size companies. So obviously we speak to a lot of people, and a fairly significant amount of those folks will be in slightly smaller companies. So they're not necessarily going to have access to the same big data as your Expedias or whoever they may be. How do you begin to adapt this sort of data measurement approach? Is it you take the approach and then you just apply it on a smaller scale, or are there specific lessons that folks can be taking at a smaller scale?
I think if anything is being deliberate about being deliberate about the strategy, not just inheriting what's already there necessarily, or what someone else told you is done in the team. And I would always try and start from all the way at the top down, right? Like every business, no matter what size, no matter what sophistication, is going to want to know at top level, what do I spend on marketing and what do I get in return? And if that's the first thing that you work on before you start optimizing campaigns, keywords, Facebook ads, creatives, etc., then just stop and do that. That would be my sage advice. Take it or leave it. Experiment with it, I guess. But honestly, like that's where I would begin, and then everything down there from there is a progression downwards. So yeah.
I love that. No, that's really cool. Thank you very much. That's very accessible. And actually, if there's a takeaway from this talk, it's about how human, describing and demonstrating the value of marketing is, but it's obviously backed up with a whole ton of data as well. Yeah. So if we take a step change, because there are some folks who are interested in your agency background as well, and you've obviously been just like, your journey's been ridiculous, dude. So it's so impressive. So we've got a question here from Lucas, who himself runs a young agency, who says, you're only 8 years into your journey, so to speak. I mean, previously a Googler, but 8 years into the Brainlabs journey. So how did you get in front of the bigger clients that you now serve? Were your best channels referrals, awards, or was it just good old phone calls?
It definitely wasn't phone calls. There's never one moment, right? But I think, I'll answer the question, and forgive me if this is not relevant for half of the community. But there was we were 2 years maybe into the business. There was 4 or 5 of us, I think, at the time. And we got this thing called an RFI, from a business called Which, who are known for reviewing products and services. And bless them, in their process for selecting an agency, they carried over their core product, which was review every product and service in the industry, which meant interview every agency. And thank God they did, because we were on this very, very long list of 72 agencies or something that they interviewed. And I think, to shorten the kind of process, they'd been through lots of different approaches. They'd been through large networks, independents, mid-tier independents, etc., etc. When we showed up, without really understanding how the agency ecosystem worked at the time, if I'm honest, we just presented stuff that probably thematically relates to what we've covered today, which is they had presented us with an LTV model. I think it was, I'm going back 5 or 6 years now, but they presented us with an LTV model, and we'd kind of taken that, divvied it up, and then turned it into a slightly different model and showed how sensitive it was to improvements, higher up the funnel. So it was different at the time. I think, the market has really caught up with some of that. But it really stood out at the time. And I think they just wanted to try something different. Like, they were not, from a digital perspective, like, they tried a bunch of stuff and it wasn't working. So that was the kind of first big client that we got in front of. And I think we were probably a bit nervous, in all honesty, partly because they were 65% of our business when we first signed them. But partly because it was a true test, right? They were a large business with large fees and all the stuff that we'd been doing that we thought was really cool. This was kind of like, whoa, this is a big deal. So I think that was probably the inflection point, was because we started applying some of that methodology. It really worked. They are still a client. They've grown. Thankfully, they're not 60% of our business anymore. I hope they'd forgive me for saying. They're an amazing client that have been on an incredible transformation as a business. And I think it was, to answer Lucas's question, it was off the back of that kind of confidence / validation from doing it with one big client that we sort of said, oh, maybe this will work on another big client. And then it did. And then, you just build a reputation. There's no secret to the business success beyond, I think that probably the one standout metric within our business. I mean, people look at growth obviously first, but the kind of driver of that is retention. We don't have a revolving door. Like, we just get clients, do great work for them, look after them, they grow with us, and then new business is actually the kind of growth part on top. No secrets. Just hard work and getting that opportunity, taking those opportunities, proving your value, and then taking that further out.
I love that. No, thank you. And your answer already does speak quite a lot to this next question, but I'll ask it just in case there's an additional layer of stuff to be unearthed, which is that you've obviously been on a journey over these past 8 years of being a marketer, a Googler, an entrepreneur, and also very successful with it. So I think particularly focusing in on these past 8 years, if you were to start entrepreneurship or your agency again, knowing what you know now, what would you do sooner? Or, and that can either be personal or from a business perspective, because I think we all have those reflections.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned, and it took me maybe a few years to learn that, which applies, and let me relate this back to the wider community so that this is relevant as much for a marketer as it is for an entrepreneur, is that, in the business, and I think this translates as well to how you show up internally as a marketer, I think that the success of the business or the success of your career is a reflection of what you put into it and your own physical, mental well-being. I probably got more out of the business at the point where I kind of focused on those first, and then the kind of business followed from there, if it makes sense. I don't want to make it sound too easy, but there's this brilliant book by a guy called Sean Aker. TED Talk is the abridged version. If you want to see that, just Google TED Talk Sean Aker. The book is called The Happiness Advantage. And the whole premise is that we operate off these rules within our current society where, if I do well at school, then I'll get into a good uni. And if I get into a good uni, which, I don't think is the be all and end all, by the way, then I'll get a great job. And then if I work really hard in that job, then I'll get promoted, and then I'll be happy. But the problem is that we've deferred that happiness for like 40 or 50 years, depending on when we finally decide that we've been successful or made it. And it's that definition of success. And by the way, we can all define our own level of success. We've all got different definitions. They've all changed over time. And that tells you instantly that they're malleable. And therefore, if you want to change it, you can. So we've all got different definitions. And that's just that formula I just described is a really unfortunate one. So what Sean suggests is the kind of reverse of that, which is actually the success that you have within your career or within your business will amplify quite significantly once you learn how to be happy yourself, which is a process and is something that you can train and work on like a muscle in the gym. And that's probably not what we came here to talk about today, but no, I spend a significant amount of time and have done over the years. I think after that realization, maybe 2 or 3 years in, not through any particular event of being unwell, but just realizing that I could bring so much more when I was feeling happy, healthy, strong, capable, and realizing how much better it was, for the business, right? Like it was, I always had this like kind of question of like, oh man, like especially early days in the business is like, and it's matured since then. It's like, if only I could clone myself, I'd get double the amount done. Well, if you have double the amount of energy, whether you're an entrepreneur or a marketer, then like you're bringing double as much to the world, you're bringing double as much value, expertise, learnings, so on and so forth. So I think that's probably how I would best summarize that advice.
That's wonderful. And to your point about like, maybe this isn't what people have come here today, then ultimately, we're all people and like we can all learn from each other in this regard. And even as you sat there talking, then I could feel my shoulders relax a little bit, because it's we're here to enjoy ourselves and I think that's a very important part of life and business. So whether or not that's a lesson in how to prove the value of marketing, then I think it's an important lesson nonetheless. And I guess if we were to shift it towards the perspective of this, then it's a solid reminder that every individual that you interact with, who you are proving the value of marketing to, should also be looking to, ultimately they want to be happy as well. So that's a way of
tenuous link, but we'll run with it, Joe. And as the connector between marketing and happiness, what a wonderful community you've built of lovely marketers. So you can feel that in the brand and the way that you've brought your community to life. And no, I totally respect that, man. So thank you.
Too kind, dude. We'll probably close out on one last question from Alison here, who asks, so I'm going to ask Alison's question, but I'm also going to layer in a question of my own here, which is, Alison asks, what would be your top tips to help creative minds develop a more analytical understanding and appreciation of that side of marketing? And it's also the quintessential question which follows that, which is, are there any resources, books, talks, whatever it may be that you would recommend as reading for either a newbie or someone looking to sort of expand their knowledge in this area?
All right. So to the first one, look, this might not be the kind of conventional answer. So take it as my opinion, not as a statement of fact. But I've always believed in and have culturally introduced within my own business this concept of playing to our own strengths. So superpowers, we call them. Mm-hmm. And I've effectively built a career off this. Like I've surrounded myself with people who are better at stuff that I don't enjoy doing as much or I'm not as good at. So if you are a creative genius, I don't know you, Alison, so we haven't had a chance to explore it yet, so forgive me if this is too judgmental, but it's my top tips without getting too far into it. It was like, it's okay not to work on your weaknesses, but to pair up with or surround yourself with people that kind of fill in those gaps. Sorry about that. It depends on your appetite. If you are a creative mind and you absolutely have this burning desire to learn more about the kind of analytical side of marketing, then absolutely feel free to delve in. And I wouldn't want to put up any barriers to anyone's progress. But at the same time, like it doesn't need to be forced, because playing to our superpowers, anyone can build a career doing that, and there's really no issue with that. Resources. What have I read that I love specifically on measurement in marketing?
Whatever it may be, whatever's been useful on your journey. I should point out at this stage that you're a prolific writer, so there is a ton of stuff that you've put out over the course of time.
Yes, and I'm writing a book, but no one knows about that yet.
Yeah, we've got the exclusive. I'll stick that on the blog post, and we'll get.
Well, I've realised that I might have signed up for more than I can handle. It's quite a lot of work, really. Certainly more than like writing a few articles. What do I like? I like anything by Les Binet, and actually you had Mark Ritson on here as well. And people might think that's some of what I've said is maybe not from the same school, but I think you find that there's more overlap than perhaps you believe. So I really enjoy everything that he puts out, even if not always agree. Yeah, I'm going to dig up. I'm quite a prolific reader, so I can't remember what I've got at the moment, but I'll send you a list afterwards. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll turn it into a beautiful PDF and everything.
Yeah. The problem in general with like marketing books, and I saw in the comments that someone was referencing, like, I don't know, the Dagmar model, which is from like the 1960s or something. There's plenty in there, but I think the world is moving, and definitely some of the principles carry over, by the way, but I think the world is moving so quickly within marketing that, like, I'm sort of skeptical of some of the manuals. Like, there are some marketing principles that I believe that we should all invest in and learn. But models for marketing have never been this kind of static thing. And I think when they're presented as ever-present truths, or in an academic way, it kind of ignores, in some ways, the development of new channels of marketing. Like, sometimes principles work, but sometimes you need to update your principles because there's new ways of advertising that didn't exist before. And I think some of that was contained within the presentation today.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. That's a fascinating insight. And actually, we've just run our own survey quite recently, and we asked folks what was the most effective channel that they found for learning over the COVID period. And it could be weighted, I mean, it's the Marketing Meetup audience, so there's going to be a fairly significant weighting towards webinars, one would think. But of 537 respondents, only 2 people selected books out of that. So I thought it was quite interesting. So anyway,
I probably wouldn't go that far. I think, it's like balancing a mix, right? Like, there are certain principles that apply to how businesses can and could operate, and I think there's plenty of useful. I'll send you some good material.
That's wicked. Thank you, dude, and thank you very much for spending your time with us today. As I said at the beginning, you're someone that I've learned a lot from over the course of time. So, like, it's an absolute privilege to have had you here.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the community.
Absolutely. I mean, a whole bunch of brilliant folks been on this session today, and we can see the comments coming in as well, sort of saying thank you very much. So that's awesome to see. So last stuff from me, very simply to say thank you all so much for being here. Please do take the opportunity to acknowledge, research, thank the sponsors. It really does make a big difference. The blog post and associated podcast for this will be going up soon. And we've got Conversation Club on Friday, and then our webinar next week will be focusing on conversational marketing and the myths associated with that. So please do check that out. That will be at 8:30 in the morning. I'm also loving the comment here from Azim, who says, thanks. 9.9 out of 10 needed for the Superman costume.
I'm saving it for a one-to-one, Azim. It's fine.
Yeah. That's brilliant. So thank you all, and do take care of yourselves. Thanks, Daniel, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.